I think we've got just about everyone we were expecting who was signing up. So we have two main speakers here. We have the applicant for Tamir Foundation, who is requesting this application for the group home. And I'll introduce them. And we also have our city planner here, and her name is Laura McCrate. So I've worked with her a number of files, and she knows a lot about planning and the bylaws and rules. Okay, so I think we'll start with the Tamir Foundation, and I'll hand it over to Risa Plotnick, and we'll let her begin, and she may pass it on to her colleagues if she, for starters. And then we'll have questions after, so you can ask your questions. Maybe they'll be answered in their presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this information session. My name is Risa Plotnick. I am the Executive Director of the Tamir Foundation. The Tamir Foundation is a nonprofit organization supported by the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. Tamir provides residential services for adults 18 and up who have an intellectual disability, from light, mild to profound, with a whole range of needs. The home that we're talking about right now has two very high functioning adults in their late 20s that have autism, that enjoy each other's company, enjoy the area, and in non-COVID times actually go to recreational and vocational programs. We're asking for another person to join them, as another friend to join, another high functioning person who is also known to them and in their community. So if you are interested, if you look on the Tamir website, we also provide a range of services. Recreation and leisure services and children and youth. So you're welcome to look at our website, and for sure you're welcome to call me. My virtual door is always open. If you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Andrew and I live opposite the house, and we have absolutely no problems. But what I am curious about is how long have the residents actually been in the house?
There's two residents in the house that have been there from the beginning. So the residents.
So sorry to interrupt, but when did they move into the house?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Risa, I might be able to help out. And
thank you.
Just to jump in, hi everyone. My name is Jacob Paulo, I'm a board member at Tamir. I'm the legal advisor, and for my day job, I'm in the municipal law group at Gowling WLG, so I'm helping Tamir out with this. Ms. Young, to answer your question, Tamir bought the house, I believe it was September of 2019. So they've been there about a year and a half, the two residents.
Okay, so my question now is, why did you not apply for the easement when you bought the house?
Hi, everyone. Jacob, I'll just take this one if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm Laura McCrate. I'm the city planner. Many of you have already contacted me via email, and maybe some of you have mailed in the notification form with your comments. So the reason they hadn't applied until December of last year, so December 2020, is because it's not qualified as a group home until there's a minimum of 3 persons inhabiting the home. So if there's only 2 in there right now, they're not qualified, they're not considered a group home. So now that Tamir is looking to add a 3rd resident, that's when they have to come in to seek relief from the bylaw for various provisions. And I just want to start the meeting also by saying that a group home is permitted in residential zones. So the area that the house is zoned, and I assume most of you around there are zoned residential first density. And this zone does permit a group home. It limits it to a maximum of 10 people. But why we are here today is because there are certain provisions in our zoning bylaw that set out rules for group homes, and the one that Tamir is applying to seek relief from is for the minimum distance separation of 300 meters. So as many of you have told me, there are other group homes in the area, which Tamir is aware of. Now that they're establishing the group home at 963 Hare, it'll be less than 300 meters from the neighboring group home. So that's the crux of the matter why we're here today. A group home is already permitted. If they were further than 300 meters, we wouldn't be here today. Thank you.
Okay, so structurally for the meeting, do you just want us to ask questions, or is there some notion of a presentation, or like, I'm happy to go either way. I just want to do things the right way.
Yeah, I was thinking you could ask questions because, I'd like to answer your concerns. And I'd like to give information if there's any more information needed. So please, if you can ask questions, that would be great.
Okay, perfect. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. You're first.
Okay, so I'm Trent Gray Donald. I represent the Glabber Park Community Alliance. I currently sit as the president. And we've had a conversation, and I think the board in general is very, very welcoming and open to this. Really only two areas came out two very tactical questions and then a more zoning long-term question. So the two short-term questions are, what we have observed is in the community that typically group homes have more of a garbage situation than most other residents. And the second is that there's more on-street parking than other residents. So those are the two main concerns that were consistent through our mail chain.
Right.
And I'm curious to see if you have any mitigations in place for either of those to start with.
It's a good question. We'd be having 3 high functioning residents in the home. We would have 1.5 staff. So they've been using the driveway actually. So they have actually not been using the street parking. They use the driveway. The driveway is quite long. And it could be that if a supervisor comes, they use the street, but really the driveway is enough there's 1 on 3 staffing. And then there's a staff who stays the night really. And then sometimes now during the COVID, we have extra staff because we want the people to go out and they go on long walks and, more activities. And, we don't want them to struggle with isolation. So we have more staff. That being said, the staff have to do some car shuffling, but they're still using the driveway. So we don't, and garbage, I haven't heard any, I haven't heard any issues with that. But I haven't heard that, but the cars I've heard.
Right, so just sorry to be the follow-up there is, are you running any other of the homes in the neighborhood today, like in Glabber Park?
No, so it's not our homes that are, it's another, it's OCL, it's another rehab, it's another center that has these 2 homes.
Okay.
Tamir is on Sharon and Colleen. Has a Tamir home on Sharon and Colleen and 1 on Riddell.
Jacob.
Yes, that's right. There are on those streets there are, but the specific homes, I think what Risa was saying was just that the specific homes that are within the 300 meter minimum separation distance are not Tamir.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm talking specifically about the bylaw that we're asking, the 300 meter distance for the house. It doesn't belong to Tamir. It belongs to another organization.
Right. Okay, I'll let others ask.
My question also was about the parking. I live on Killarney and I was never made aware that 2103 was going to be a group home. 2046 had existed for, I believe, before we came, but definitely on-street parking is an issue. It started out that there was to be 6 residents and staff, and the residents were to be taken out to day programs, etc. That changed. So there's always parking on the street, even though there's parking available in the driveway. The garbage bins sometimes do get to be an issue. When I have complained, it has been picked up. There'd be nitrile gloves and stuff in the ditch. The other thing is the
the big thing is there's no pride of ownership. There's no landscaping. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the houses. My complaint isn't the residents. My complaint is the staff. So my question about parking on Hare was, if there's 1.5, I'm assuming, say 2 people staff, I assume there's going to be a Tamir van in the driveway. I'm just wondering how you're going to deal with it and want it to be assured that it would be promoted driveway parking, not on the street. And if there was going to be, you know, physiotherapists visiting or OMS coming to visit or whatever. Parking is an issue. It affects you know, snow plowing, street cleaning, you know, it's a nuisance.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Risa, I might be able to help out with that. So
Can I speak after Jacob, please?
Yeah, Dorothy, there's a couple more people ahead of you, but
Okay,
I saw your hand. Thank you.
and so fair enough. I'm familiar with the 2103 Killarney property. I mean, first of all, just as you've pointed out, that one has 6 residents and staff, and assuming a similar staffing ratio to Tamir, you're talking sort of a minimum 3 or 4 staff there. So that's 9-10 people, whereas Hare is going to be half that. It'll be 5 people. And so, I mean, really, like, we're talking about a standard family moving
Right.
into that house. And also just having looked at pictures, there are, I mean, Tamir's, the 963 Hare's driveway just happens to be significantly bigger. And so basically at most you'll have, because the residents don't own cars, at most you're going to have a couple of cars from staff and then maybe 1 additional vehicle for visits from supervisor or the ministry or physiotherapists or whatnot. And I mean, you can comfortably fit probably 4 or 5 cars in that parking lot. So we really don't foresee that being an issue. And then just in terms of the pride of ownership of the landscaping, I mean, all I can say is that Tamir runs 7 other homes in the city and we've never had issues with that.
You know, the staff are very, they're very proud, honestly, of working for Tamir, and they take really pride in the house that they're in. So they're designated to these houses. It's not like they're moving all over the place. So these residents also are very high functioning. So we don't have a lot of extra professionals there, but it could be, you know, if they or we need professional services, well, of course we'll get it like anybody else, but they're really, they don't need more extra services, and the staffing is maximum 2. And during the COVID time, honestly, I try and do as many staffing as I can just to have everybody go out and do stuff. But even then, they're still using the driveway. So I think, you know, I don't even know if you knew that it was a Tamir home to begin with. They're so, you know, involved in the community and they're so part of it that they're really, I don't know if it stands out like that either. It will be maximum 3 people in the home. So it's much, much smaller than the homes that you know in the area.
Thank you, Risa.
Sorry, I have a question as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think I've got a few questions in line here. So I hope you can all just understand that I'll try and get people in order. I saw Andrew Young, and then I saw Krista, and then Dorothy, and then who is the last one?
Gwen Moore.
Gwen. Okay. Gwen, we'll have you after Dorothy. Thank you. Okay, Andrew.
So the Tamira model seems to be small houses, small populations. You say you have 7 in the city. The idea is not to expand these houses, I guess, or these homes beyond the current capacity.
Whether we'll have more residences, probably, you know, but the idea is not to put many people in one home. We want it to be like a home, and yeah.
That's what I was asking. So your plan is to have few people.
Exactly. You know, the ideology is it should be a home and not an institution. So, and people should be as autonomous as possible. So if they can move on to a more independent apartment life, which maybe some of the people in Hare can, you know, then we'll try and do that. But yes, that's the ideology that we work with.
the reason, of course, I was asking was there wouldn't be the plan to put a 10-story building in place of the house because you like houses.
Yeah, because we're not building institutions, we're building,
Right.
we want to be part of the neighborhood. So that
Thank
wouldn't,
you.
that wouldn't look good in your neighborhood.
Well, and also, Risa, I just think it's helpful to add that the zoning permission that Tamir is actually asking for, all that it's doing, the only zoning that's being changed is the provision related to the 300-meter minimum separation distance. And so it's still going to be zoned residential first density. Tamir can't turn around and just put an apartment building there.
Why does the 300 meters exist?
That's an excellent question.
It's a good question. It's a little bit like people zoning, but yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
question.
I think Laurel can answer that.
Yeah, I think that's a Laurel question.
Actually, if I could just finish my comment.
Yes,
I
but
talked to
please
I talked to
keep to
someone
the
in-
order, please.
I
Thank
talked
you.
to someone else who knew about the Tamira Foundation, and he was telling me that you're very good citizens. You don't hold large noisy parties, and you like small houses. So I thought that was a very good definition of a good neighbor.
Oh, thank you.
And we
Thank you.
live opposite you.
Yeah. Thank you. Can Krista's next?
Well, Laurel, this is going to come back to you in just a moment, but I did want to say that I live on Muskoka, a couple houses down from where the proposed house is. And we're not per se, we have no issue with how Tamir runs the other home that we see often on Sharon. Our concern is, as Trent spoke for the GPCA, with respect to the on-street parking and the garbage and others like potential drain on services. We have horrible water pressure in this city. While adding, bulk, putting more residents and staff in will increase that drain. There is already occasionally on-street parking. So it's not that, like, as much as you plan to have the staff park in the laneway, we know that once they're on the street, a lot of staff just don't move their cars once they're on the street. So we walk by it most nights and we do see that already. So it is, to my mind, it is going to get exacerbated as another resident is added. So my question then to Laurel is, what is the rationale for the 300 meters? And why should this home be permitted to be in violation with two other homes of that 300-meter suggested distance?
Sure, and that's a very good question and one I've received from many of you already. And unfortunately, there is no simple answer. Previously, when the city was we were not amalgamated as one city and we had all the different towns and cities, there existed provisions for separation requirements for group homes, specifically to deal with Vanier, the Byward Market, more for the downtown, but Nepean and other various municipalities did have these provisions. And when it was time to amalgamate our bylaw, we chose to make it one general provision for all group homes to not have any more, to have no more than however many within a certain distance. So this is going back over 15 years ago. It hasn't been removed from our bylaw, but I will say the city has come out with a draft new official plan, and the direction in our new official plan is that we will be removing all requirements related to separation distances for group home, because simply it's not legal anymore. We don't plan for people, we plan for land uses. So to put these specific requirements on certain populations, it's not fair. So the directions and the policies that you are able to see on the city's website will be removing any reference to separation distances. And once our bylaw is redone, once the OP goes through its process, the zoning bylaw, that will be removed from the group home provisions as well.
Okay.
And just one other thing to touch on about parking and increasing residences. I think Jacob said it very well at the beginning. There are only 3 people moving into this house, which is, no less than a family with children moving in. It's the same amount, if not less. If, a family had 3 children, this is only 3 people. So it's being treated as essentially a residential use as it is. And so we're not putting any more burden than it would be if a family had moved in. Second, for on-street parking is permitted. It would be no different if a family had a party and 20 people came over. I get that it's maybe not every day, but the matter of the fact is on-street parking is permitted and people are allowed to park on the street. Whether they're violating, if it's a 3-hour rule and they're not moving their cars, you know, that's when bylaw can become involved, but they are permitted to park on the street during the day.
They are exceeding the allowed timelines.
Yeah, and that's what 311 is there for. If they are exceeding it, you know, it's obviously within your right. Please call bylaw. That's what it's there for. But if they are abiding by the 3 hours, then that's their right to park on the street. But I think Jacob and Risa also mentioned the driveway here is a lot different than the existing two that are down the street. I've taken a look and it's a completely different situation where we have a very long driveway. Yes, you might have to stack your cars single file. But there is a lot more room in the driveway than there are for the two other homes. Whether or not, you know, staff choose to park in there, you know, we can only encourage Tamir to tell their staff to do so to alleviate some of the pressure on the street.
Thank you. Okay. Dorothy, you're next, and then Gwen, and then Marie.
As far as parking goes, we live pretty well opposite the house. They face us. And as far as parking on the street goes, there has been parking on the street before Tamir even moved in because of other situations on the street, and we won't go into that. And as far as garbage goes, there was one incident in the summer when their garbage cans got knocked over, and that was when I actually twigged that it was a group home. I used to lead the neighborhood watch in this area, so I'm a bit on the nosy side. I have seen cars coming and going. They are very respectful of each other. They park carefully so that one is parking at the front of the drive, the other is at the back. They can maneuver around each other. I have seen very few cars parked on the street, and they are very careful with their garbage. As long as it's 3 residents and they don't try and shoehorn more in, to me, it seems like another family moving in with grown-up kids.
Well, thank
That's
you.
it.
Thank you, Dorothy. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Gwen?
Oh, and they don't have loud parties.
We have autistic men there. We really can't have loud parties. They don't
Right.
like it.
Hello, it's Gwen here, and I'm here with my husband David as well. So we both have a couple of questions. My first question, just about the general question about infrastructure in the neighborhood. We don't have water pressure, and in general, you know, how does the city you know, address issues when there's, you know, this may be a small group home, but it's a general question about these larger group homes. How does the city, you know, deal with poor infrastructure in the neighborhood to do with water pressure? And so they don't really address that, you know, that when you add more people, as in a group home, you do put more stress, right, on the already kind of old infrastructure in this neighborhood. And the second issue is in general about you know, lack of pride and ownership, and not this home, but you know, the one further down the street, the hedge is like 30 feet tall, the fence is falling down, you know, and what are neighbors supposed to do? I mean, are we supposed to call the city, or I guess we can do nothing? You don't even know who to call about these types of issues when it arrives, because you can't just go to the neighbor and say, oh, I notice your hedge is 30 feet tall and it's full of weeds. It does impact the neighborhood, you know, when you see something like that.
There actually is property standards, and you can call 311. So we deal with those calls all the time. So yeah. So
Sorry, I'll add my question. So it's David here. So the as you know, Teresa, in our neighborhood, there's been a lot of complaints about traffic. They're putting in new stop signs on a lot of little small side streets and Lenester. And it's just a question about sort of this, it's more than like group homes are densification, and regardless of if there's only 3 now, the bylaw says it can go up to 10 plus workers. And when you have a higher density of these homes in neighborhoods like Glaber Park, not only is it affecting water, but it's affecting road use too. And when you have 24-hour staffing in these homes and people coming, going, whether it's 8-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts, like it's a lot more cars and a lot more people coming into the neighborhood, whether it's family members, the personal support workers, doctors, physios, all these people visiting this home, the other 3 or 4 that's in the neighborhood. It affects neighborhoods, not, each one individually may not be an issue, but when you have a higher density in smaller, older neighborhoods with small streets, it causes problems.
Okay, I'll take that as a comment because I don't think there's a question there for, unless you want to respond, Laurel. I can, say that we're dealing with intensification everywhere. That's actually something that is a goal for the city. But this doesn't fall in that category. The group home is, as Laurel has pointed out, is already allowed. So it's only because it happens to be closer to another one that it's exceptional. Yeah.
No, I recognize that, but the house on Woodruff that started out as 8 townhouses turned into 60 bedrooms. Even if there's 3 residents, they can go up to 10. And when you have a higher density of group homes, even if they're all allowed, it's a question about the city. Are they cognizant of the impact of these? And, what are they doing to have, safer neighborhoods when you have industrial type or residential type commercial people coming 24 hours a day to these homes?
Yeah, because there is increased traffic. And I think if you have small children or, issues with, because people who don't live in the neighborhood may not necessarily be cognizant, right, of the fact that, they shouldn't race down the street, because they're trying to get to, a group home. And so there is a difference between people who reside in the area and people who are just trying to get to a destination. That's all I'm saying. So the increased traffic and people racing, down the street is something I think the city should be aware of. There seems to be like no recognition of the fact that there's going to be a lot of increased traffic on Hare Avenue because 24-hour care is required. So you will have people coming and going, not just to this group home, but the one on the corner and the one on, the next street. So, if there are a lot more cars on the street, it affects the safety of our streets. And who's monitoring that?
Well, I hope that everybody drives safely. This is something that's an issue. And I'm actually going to be dealing with traffic calming, and we'll be having a meeting with Glaber Park later on. I've got a couple more on the go right now in other communities because everybody has the same concern. It's nothing to do with group homes. It's just the fact that people find that cars are speeding through their neighborhood. Sometimes they find out it's their neighbor. It's an issue everywhere, and we're quite aware of it. And we do want to work with communities on keeping people at reasonable speeds. It's really important. People want safety in their neighborhoods, and that should be a priority. The implication that if somebody doesn't live there, they might drive faster. I don't have, that's how it feels like they're just going through and they don't have a pride of the neighborhood. I understand what you're saying. We have to ensure that they drive properly. And we have, we'll work on traffic calming in communities. I'm already talking to Glaber Park about that. Trent knows that because there's a number of people who've raised that issue. So that will be a discussion.
Thank you.
If I could just weigh in on the infrastructure comment. So for this application, it's just a zoning bylaw amendment. As we've heard, they're not making any changes to the house as it stands today. It'll look the exact same as it does right now. It would be different if we were looking at a site plan application where they were looking to maybe not specifically in the middle of a first residential density neighborhood. If we were in a different neighborhood where they were looking to either tear down the existing building and put up a new building where we would know we need to take a look at the infrastructure, then we would require certain studies and plans that would inform the city, is there going to be a strain on the infrastructure? Is there capacity in the existing infrastructure for the proposed use? For this type, and in all residential first density zones, in residential 2, 3, basically in all the residential zones, group homes are permitted as of right, and they become a group home as soon as there's more than 3 people. And we can go through the definition if we need to go there. If they wanted to increase above 10 people, they'd have to come back in to mirror any organization, would have to come back in for another application to increase that capacity. And at that point, we might want to take a look at, you know, servicing for that property to see if you are having a problem with water pressure. Is there enough water in the neighborhood? Storm sanitary, we would take a look at that after 10 people. So I don't want it to seem like we're ignoring it right now, but we have to keep in mind they are permitted as of right for this application. But if you have concerns for, you know, future applications, that's something else we would look at when the time comes.
Thank you, Laurel. And this is something I've dealt with Laurel on big applications, and that issue does come up. So the city does look at those, but this is not the case. This is a group home is not putting a strain on these resources. So thank you very much. The next person is Marie.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I actually would like to address the 300-meter bylaw rule. This is probably before Laurel's time, but there is a reason why there is a 300-meter minimum separation prescribed in official plans. And that was to protect or maintain the character of the neighborhood from proliferation of group homes in the neighborhood. So the balance there was to make the separation 300 meters. Now in this situation, there are already 2 group homes in the vicinity. Both of them violate that 300-meter minimum distance rule. One of them, thank you, on page 9 of the report, one of them is 196 meters away, which is less than 2/3 of the prescribed minimum distance. The other one is only 71 meters away, which is less than 1/3 of the prescribed minimum distance. The neighborhood already has 2 group homes in the area that violate the specified minimum separation. And I'm going to go into the slippery slope argument. So you add a 3rd group home that violates the prescribed minimum separation in the same little area, and possibly in the future, someone could come forward and say, you know, the character of the neighborhood is group homes. So, and as Laurel has already pointed out, group homes are accepted in residential neighborhoods. The only rule is this separation to avoid proliferation to the extent that you would have like a neighborhood of group homes within a residential neighborhood, which is what the bylaw was attempting to mitigate or avoid. So that's my first point, that to put 3 within this area would possibly would be a toehold to someone else coming in and saying the nature or the character of this neighborhood is group homes.
Okay. Okay, Marie, I'm going to let Laurel comment on that, because the fact that we're here and we're having that they're making an application, so because of the reason that they're within less than 300 meters, we're going through this process. So this is an exception for sure. So Laurel, would you like to comment on that?
Sure, thank you, Councillor. So as you mentioned, there are 2 other group homes in the area that you are saying are violating the bylaw. There are current exceptions on those 2 properties that allow them to locate where they are less than 300 meters apart. So in the zoning bylaw, there's an exception that's 1340, so urban exception 1340, that says the minimum distance separation of 300 meters does not apply to those 2 properties. So they're not in violation of the bylaw because they have that exception that says they can be there, which is similarly to what Tamir is applying for today for their property. So they are in conformity with the bylaw.
And if there was any future ones, it would be an application process again.
Yeah, if there's a 4th one that wants to come in that's less than 300 meters from the properties on Hare and is it Killarney? Is that what it is on the other
Yes,
street?
Blarney, yeah.
Blarney, I get the two Ks confused. Yes, then they would have to come in. But as I mentioned before, once we do our new official plan and we update our bylaw and that separation distance, no longer is part of our policy framework, then nobody has to apply for anything. They can locate where they so choose.
And Councillor, if I could,
Can I
I think
comment
it
on that?
may just be helpful to add that minimum separation distances, they existed in a lot of municipal zoning bylaws. Sort of, they're kind of a relic of an earlier era of planning. A number of municipalities have already been moving forward to get rid of them. Ottawa would not be the first one. And among other things, there are a number of cases from the Ontario Municipal Board, the former name for the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and also from their opinions from the Ontario Human Rights Commission that have found that this is minimum separation distances are an impermissible form of discrimination, because one of the principles of land use planning is that the planning has to be related to the actual use and not to the people that occupy it. And so the Ontario Human Rights Commission has found that minimum separation distances for group homes are basically only there because of the people that occupy a group home, because as we've said, a family of 8 could move in here and there wouldn't be a need for any application. And so I think that may be helpful just for everyone to understand that that's some of the rationale for getting rid of these minimum separation distances, that they are a form of discrimination.
May I comment? May I comment to Laurel and to Jacob?
Marie, yeah, okay.
Okay, so Laurel, what you're saying to me is that the word that I use, violation, is incorrect because those 2 properties have already applied for, or one of them has already applied for and been approved for the change that this 3rd property is being asked to do. That's all you're saying. The only reason why they're not in violation is because they've already got this change made.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So what I'm saying is I don't think the change should be made in this situation because that's 3 too close together. And speaking to Jacob, once a group home is allowed, there is no limitation or specification as to what that group home is used for. So in this situation, the group home is intended for people with developmental disabilities, and I have no problem with that. However, in future, that group home could be used for John Howard Society and other group home situations that might not be as pleasant in that neighborhood. And if you have 3 of them together, or 4 of them together, or 5 of them together, again, you're changing the character of the neighborhood. And yes, it is a relic, but there's a reason why it was there. And while it still exists, I think that we should honor that in this neighborhood, in Glaber Park.
Okay, Laurel, can you comment on types of group homes?
As in, what do you mean types of group homes? Like who could locate here?
Yeah.
Well, just the zoning bylaw defines, it doesn't specify in the bylaw what type of group home can locate where. It's just a general definition of a group home, which I think it's important. I'll just read it out for everybody. So a group home in the bylaw is defined as a supervised residential use building in which 3 to 10 persons, exclusive of their dependents and of any staff, live as a group in a single housekeeping establishment and where residents require support or supervision on a daily basis, but excludes correctional facilities and shelters. So the bylaw doesn't go into specificity on who can locate where. It just generalizes the term group home, but excludes correctional facilities. So the whole point of that is because planning is based on land use. We don't plan for people. And I know that just sounds like a ridiculous statement, but that's what, we're taught in school, and that's what we're taught in our profession. We're here to plan for land uses such as, retail, commercial, industrial, institutional. We're not here to plan for specific demographics, tenures for housing type. We're more planning for a land use.
Okay, thank you. And I saw that there was a question from Peter that got answered about, yes, it can go up to 10. But Risa has been very clear that this is for 3.
Can I speak, please?
Yes, I
Hi.
think we're on our list.
So
Dorothy,
what
yeah,
Laurel will say, Laurel, I totally understand that that is your professional point of view. And this is a political question. So it's up to our politicians to decide whether zoning bylaws such as ours maintain a separation distance at this time. I don't have a problem with the group home for people with developmental disabilities, honestly. If they were to relocate outside that 300-meter area, which they absolutely can, because it's, as Laurel has already pointed out, they can locate in any residential area at all. It's only this 300-meter rule that they're asking to be changed so that they can locate within 71 meters of one group home that's already there and within 200 meters of another group home that's already there, rather than outside that 300-meter area. And again, so I'll just summarize. My position is that it's that exempting the subject property from the clause 125(1), subsection 1, which is the 300-meter rule. It's just not appropriate for this property. If the organization wanted to purchase another property in the area and have their group home there outside that 300 meters, that's fine. It's a lovely area and I can totally understand why you chose it, because I live here for the very same reason. The quality of life is so great. Okay, so that's my 2 bits on the 300-meter rule, which is what we're supposed to be discussing anyway.
okay. Dorothy and Andrew both had their hands up. I'll go with Dorothy first. Okay, Andrew?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Dorothy. Dorothy, you're on mute, so no one can hear you.
I can talk then. Did the definition of group homes excluded for John Howard? The definition that Laurel read out seemed to exclude John Howard.
You mean like a shelter?
Yes.
Yeah, it does exclude correctional facilities and shelters, because
John
shelters are,
Howard Society is not a correctional facility. John Howard Society group homes are not a correctional facility. It is a group home for men who have recently been incarcerated and are trying to reintegrate back into the community. It could also, the group home could also be used for young offenders who are trying to reintegrate into the community.
correct. So it doesn't specify any specific groups. It just tells you who cannot locate there, which is a correctional facility or a shelter.
Okay, Andrew,
And that
did
is why it's not appropriate to have them 300
Hey,
within 300-meter area. That's
okay.
it. I'm not saying anything more, Teresa.
Okay, thanks, Marie.
Can I go now? I just
Sure.
very, very quickly, Tamir has been in existence as a foundation for how many years? How many homes are you running? How long have you held those homes? And how long do you propose to keep going? The last question is virtually impossible, but.
It's such a good question. So Tamir is going to have its 36th celebration this year coming. It plans
36
on
years.
36 years. So, and it plans on moving the next 36 years and onward, because, you know, this is what we're doing. We're servicing the community and we're working at expanding to help children and youth. And our job is really to service the community, to be a more inclusive community. And so our intention is not to build these big institutions, but to have families and have people being part of social participation and community inclusion. So we tend on, you know, we are going to be around for a very, very long time, and we plan to hold on to Hare for an extremely long time. So think of us as a family moving into your area, because that's what we are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have to say that I grew up in a family of 8 people. So I hope that we would have been welcome in the neighborhood, but that was pretty normal back then. We were one of 6 kids. So, but times are different now. I did see another hand up. Barrington, 410. I'm sorry, I don't see. You're on mute. You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
I've got Ms. Barrington 410 first. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Susan. I live on Hare Avenue. I do agree with all the comments that Marie had previously stated, that I think, when you have a bylaw in effect, that's what you have to adhere by. And I know from speaking with a lot of the residents, within a 5-block area here, we have 4 group homes. And I'm wondering if Tamir Foundation, which I have no objections to the group homes by any means. You serve a very valuable to the community. Were you aware that there was the group home on Killarney and Hare Avenue at the time that you wanted to use the existing property right now as a group home?
Jacob?
I can't speak to whether Tamir was specifically aware. I don't believe that Tamir. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think so. I had to I found out actually through my colleagues. So I didn't know that there were group homes in the area. We kind of found out there were group homes in the area. So no, we didn't know.
No, basically this, I was just basically the property became available, and Tamir, as you pointed out, Tamir has a home on Colleen. It has a couple of other homes
On Riddell.
On Riddell in the general area. And so we're familiar with the area. It's a great area. And so a home came available that met Tamir's needs. And so that was more of the impetus for buying it.
Yeah, I think, when you say that, I guess it's Laurel that says that, future bylaws are going to, will be getting rid of any sort of distance requirement. But in the meantime, you have a bylaw that I think that we need to adhere to. I mean, this happens all too often with everything that's going on in the neighborhood, from what's the so-called minor variances are not minor in nature, and not just dealing with the group homes, with a lot of other issues as well. And even though residents seem to object to everything still gets granted and gets passed. But I think it's, residents here are not against the group homes. It's adhering to the existing bylaws is the issue. And as I say, within a 5-block radius, there are 4 group homes in 5 blocks.
I think that, and I mean, maybe Laurel can speak to this if she wishes to. I think a lot of the bylaws, I guess, from a development perspective, and this minimum separation bylaw is not necessarily designed to be adhered to slavishly all the time. I think it's more in place so that in a situation like this, the city has adequate controls to make sure that if someone wants to come in and they want to be inside that 300-meter minimum separation distance, the city has a chance to look at it, and the residents have a chance to look at it and to say, okay, what is it that's actually being proposed to be here? And are we okay with it, with this specific exemption, right? Like it's not just a general, are we okay with ignoring the bylaw for the sake of ignoring the bylaw? It's a question of, are we okay with this Tamir group home, which I mean, again, Tamir is there are currently 2 residents there with 1 staff that's there all during the day, and then 1 staff that's there at night. And this entire meeting is because Tamir wants to put a single other person there, right? It's the equivalent of someone's child coming home from university, right? Or moving back to Ottawa.
I understand that that's the proposal now, but there's nothing stopping from that growing up to 10 residents, not including family and staff. It always starts out small and ends up growing.
We would have to build on the house. So, there's and I'm sure there's another permit for that. But, I think that, these guys are friends with each other, to be honest with you, and they're very high functioning, and there's enough, it's a big enough house to have 3 people where they live well together, and that's what we want to do. I've been in the field for about 25 years, not to age myself, but what we're seeing is that families have more than one child sometimes that have physical disabilities or autism. And, you know, sometimes they have 2, 3, and even 4 I've seen, you know, so these families, they move to residences. And I'd like, you know, the idea that these families are welcome wherever they move. So in a broader, you know, inclusive philosophy and neighborhood, these are the people that are part of, you know, the community. And, you know, where you're going to see, you know, families like that. And our family that we have there happen to be, you know, 3 high functioning autistic males that are in their late 20s that in really good times are out in vocational and recreation and leisure programs. So these are grown up kids basically that are part of the neighborhood. And I think that's basically the reflecting what the community looks like. This is, so you can call it a group home. It's a family of 3 young adults with 2 staff that are helping them out. That's what we're doing. And that's what this home looks like.
Well, as I said, I'm not against, you know, the group homes, but it starts out small. And then with these zoning bylaws, every time, you know, there's an excuse or an exclusion, or the city grants, you know, it doesn't apply, it just opens the floodgates for more and more things that are happening in our neighborhood. You give it to one person and then they use that for their next application for something else. We've seen it all the time in here. It's not a group home per se.
We don't have any intention to do that, you know, and it's not our intention. It's kind of like a family occupying a home, and then they're having another kid and another kid and another kid. And unfortunately we can't stop that. But for us, you know, for Tamir, you know, our intention is to have these 3 guys there. And 3 people. So if they move out, it would be 3 people. So 3 people, they're not moving anywhere, but 3 people in this place, and respectfully, they're staying there and, you know, and being part of the community. So just, you know, I guess it's the same idea that we can't tell families to stop having kids. We can, you know, and the houses get bigger and bigger with more kids, and, you know, and sometimes they're squished into this little house. But in our case, there's enough room for 3 adults to comfortably, very, very comfortably live in this house, along with staff that they don't need that much support. So along with 1 staff that supports them. Now there is more staff, so you might see another car because of the COVID times, because we want them to go for walks in the neighborhood and we want to occupy them, and we don't want them to feel isolated and lonely. So we support them with more staffing. So, but when things get back to normal and more familiar, we'll get back to our normal life.
Thank you. Ireland, excuse me. So Ireland is next. Thank you.
There, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to know, is this a done deal? Or is this all for naught, this chatter, or can this be stopped? Or, you know, is this just a done deal now and we're just talking?
I'm going to let Laurel explain the process, because Tamir said that they wanted to reach out to the community, by the way, and have this meeting. So I just want to make that reference. But Laurel, go ahead in terms of the process.
I just want to further say I have nothing against the group homes whatsoever. The residents and the ones that are here are fantastic. It's about the integrity of the neighborhood. It is very evident that those are not residential homes with families living in them. There's parking lots. Instead of 2 cars in a driveway, there's 6. So what do you think that's going to do when you've got 1 group home on Killarney and Hare and only 3 houses in between this one that you're proposing right next door? I mean, it doesn't come into effect really, but there's a disabled man in the house right next door that has 3 full-time staff coming and going constantly. You know, it's not a neighborhood anymore when you don't know your neighbors. it's people coming and going constantly. The traffic from those group homes on Killarney is incredible. And I'm sure the 300-meter rule was instilled so that it protects the fabric of a neighborhood. So it looks like a lovely residential neighborhood still, because the houses that are there now, especially the one on the corner of Killarney and Hare, which is only 3 houses away, is very clearly not a house where people
Okay.
like.
Thanks. I'm going to get Laurel to answer the question, but we have to wrap up soon because we're going to end at 7:30. So Laurel?
So just to go over a little bit of the process. So right now we're having a community information session that the councillor has hosted at, her willingness and Tamir's as well. Because the applicant has come in for a zoning bylaw amendment, we're required to proceed to what's called planning committee. So their application was submitted. The city has circulated it. We're going through the circulation period right now where we receive comments from members of the public, internal departments, as well as external agencies. Once the circulation period ends, if we have any comments that I need to go back to Jacob and Tamir with, then I can do so. If we're at an issue resolution stage, we move next to writing a report to planning committee. So the planning department only makes a recommendation to planning committee and council, and the ultimate decision lies with planning committee and council. So planning services being myself, so the file lead, and my managers. I'll write the report. It will move its way up the chain, whether we recommend approval or refusal. It'll proceed to planning committee, and the members on planning committee will vote to either uphold our recommendation or reverse it. And then it will go to council for final decision. After
And just
council
so-
makes,
Yeah.
just one more
sorry.
step. That's okay. After council makes its decision, when the notice goes out to all of you, and I should say, if you have not emailed me yet, please do so that I can notify you of when planning committee will take place. You'll receive my report 10 days prior to planning committee. You won't receive anything unless you've emailed me or mailed me, and people, I'm not going into the office, but people who go in are scanning your mail if you have mailed me. So please do that. So once the notice goes out after council, there's a 20-day appeal period. So let's say planning committee and council approve the application. If you have written in or you've come to speak to planning committee, you're eligible to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal. Vice versa, if planning committee and council refuse the application, Tamir is also eligible to appeal.
Is there a deadline to file any objections?
Sorry, say that again?
Are there any, is there a deadline? I saw February the 9th.
So that's kind of to light a fire under people to make sure they do provide comments, not necessarily for the public. You're welcome to submit comments at any time throughout the process, but if I don't set deadlines for colleagues and departments, I will be sitting here till I'm older, much older. I don't want to give it age, but older, waiting for comments. But members of the public are welcome to submit. I do encourage you to submit them earlier on so they form part of my report. So there is a section regarding public consultation where I have to summarize comments received to date. So if you email me after my report is prepared, it doesn't form part of that record. You are also eligible, or anyone can write into planning committee or attend. It'll be virtually. You can attend through Zoom and speak for 5 minutes. So your written comments to planning committee and council hold the same weight as if you came and presented yourself.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to point out, I'm not a member of planning committee, but I always attend when there's applications of anything that's in the ward. And I can be there. And if someone from the community is there, I can make sure their questions get answered by staff if there was anything that they feel that did not get answered. So you have 5 minutes to speak at the planning committee. So the 10 members of planning committee, they'll ask you questions, or they'll ask staff questions of something you raised. So to make sure that they've got all the information before they make their decision. So that is a big step. This meeting actually is not required, but I made sure it happened because I knew how important it is to have a meeting at the community level early in the process so that you got the information. And if you feel that you want to come out, you can, so that you can, say how you feel about it. So that is still a possibility. And we'll give you guidelines and give you the information on how to do that if you wish. Yeah, I think I saw a question from Peter, just a second, in chat. Is there an expectation date that the 300 meters aspect will be formally removed for consideration from the bylaws?
I was
Well-
just looking for a link to send the draft official plan so that I can point you to where those policies are. So it's a very tight timeline from my understanding from, the policy side. I'm in the development review side. They're looking to go to planning committee in the next couple months. So right now the draft official plan is out there for review and comments, and you're welcome to provide comments back to the policy team as well on basically anything in the new official plan. There's lots of comments to be made. So that deadline is this fall. They're hoping to have everything in place for the OP, for the official plan. Our zoning bylaw has yet to begin its review, and our zoning bylaw is basically a beast. It's atrocious and it's large, and that's going to take a couple years to come into place. So they have to do a full review, basically take, if the OP is put in place, all of the policies that are in the OP, make sure they line up with the zoning bylaw, and that will still take several years. But there's public consultation on that as well. So I'm sure the councillor will update everyone as she does from time to time regarding those. But don't close the meeting yet. Oh, Connie did it. Never mind. The new official plan is there.
Yeah, she's got it all there. Connie's been putting things in the chat for you, for connections, for everybody. I think I'll take this last question, Gwen, and then we're going to have to finish up. So okay.
Well, I guess the question is, if the bylaw is going to change, like it doesn't sound as though the city's going to say no to this proposal. Like on what basis, or what would it take for the city to say no? Because it sounds as though, with all due respect, that you're already thinking that it should be approved and there's no issues here.
That's probably me being the city. I don't know that so we don't have a formal position yet. We have to wait for the circulation period to be ended. I discuss it with my manager. We take a look at the comments submitted, and I know many people feel like their comments, go unheard and planners just read them and set them aside. I assure you that's not the case. Like I've already talked to my manager about this. I've met with Jacob and Risa to kind of discuss some of the concerns that we're seeing, and is there any way that we can address them. And we thought having this meeting was a great idea also, so that we're all here together, because the planning committee, it's not necessarily a conversation. You can speak, and members of committee, if they have any questions for you, can ask you questions, but you don't really have any conversation with staff. So we haven't come to a formal position yet. We're not at that time. Hi Andrew, you're waving. So there still is time for us to make our decision.
Yeah. Another thing about these meetings is that sometimes you can, I don't think is a case here, but you can have things that you thought were a concern that aren't a concern, or that you can find out that there's some flexibility in something that that was being proposed. That happens on different applications. Okay, so that's part of the reason it's good to have that kind of conversation ahead of time, so people can find out.
A quick comment.
Yeah.
Laurel, you're very impressive. Thank you.
I think she's great.
I mean, it's because my kids are back in school, Andrew. This last week, this would not have been so pleasant for me. So that's kind of, thank you.
She's doing cartwheels. The kids are back. She's got little ones. And that's why it's a big thing for her to come out in an evening, because she's got little ones to look after.
Also, my video is off because they've been coming down behind me. So I don't mean to be rude.
Anyway, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and the conversation's not over. You can still continue to ask questions, and if you don't feel you've been it's been addressed, please let us know. We've got the applicant to answer questions, and the city, depending on what kind of questions. And I appreciate everyone coming out. You really care about your community. That's why you're here. You want to. It's a community you love, and you want to make sure you can continue to love it. And I know that's the reason that brings you out. So thank you very, very much, and take care and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing it.
Thank you,
Right, take
Councillor.
care.
Thank
Yes,
Bye-bye.
thank you.